The drone doesn't need eyes. It hunts temperature. While you're thinking about walls, locks, and how quiet you are, your body is already confessing to the sky. 98 degrees of wet biology bleeding into the night. You breathe, you live, you glow. Civilization taught you that shelter is something you build. Physics teaches you that shelter is something you don't leak. To a thermal sensor, your house is just a thin excuse wrapped around a warm animal. Most people fail in the first minute because they hide from sight instead of heat. They kill lights. They whisper. They tape windows like fear is soundproofing. None of it matters. Heat doesn't care how quiet you are. It travels through drywall, glass, wood, and bad assumptions. The drone doesn't hear you. It reads you. Every breath is data. Every shift redraws your silhouette in invisible ink that machines read like scripture. The first rule of ghost sheltering is cruel and simple. You are the problem. Not the drone, not the technology. You. Your metabolism is a furnace that never turns off. Your shelter fails the moment it lets that furnace touch the outside world. That's why real hiding starts with subtraction, not construction. You don't build safety. You erase evidence. Heat escapes in only a few ways, and it always takes the easiest path. It radiates. It conducts. It convects. You don't need formulas. You need respect. Warm air rises. Surfaces glow. Thin materials lie to you. Press your body against an exterior wall, and you've just written your name across it in infrared. Lean into a window, and you become a diagram. So you pull inward. You create space between your heat and the shell of the building. You stop hugging walls. You stop sleeping near glass. You learn that empty air, when kept still, is better insulation than anything you bought. A cold buffer is worth more than a reinforced door. Distance is discipline. This is where people reach for gimmicks. Foil blankets, shiny hacks, internet tricks. That's panic thinking. Real concealment is boring. It's geometry and patience. It's choosing where not to be. You let the structure cool before you settle. You let your pulse slow. You stop moving like prey that knows it's being hunted. Movement is the loudest mistake. A sudden shift is a thermal flare that lingers. Sit wrong and the chair glows. Pace and the floor remembers you. Heat has memory. Buildings remember. You learn to move once deliberately and then become part of the room. Furniture doesn't fidget. Neither do survivors. The drone passes overhead, patient and mechanical. It isn't impressed by cleverness. It waits for contrast, for persistence, for patterns that say life. Most shelters glow because people can't sit with discomfort. They adjust. They react. They try to outsmart instead of outlasting. Clever gets you outlined in red. The ones who vanish don't fight the scan. They starve it. They give it nothing sharp enough to classify. No spikes, no habits, no warmth touching the skin of the world. Just a cold, boring shape that doesn't deserve a second look. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see where the survivors are watching from, and hit subscribe while you're here. Once you accept that heat is the betrayal, insulation stops being about comfort and starts being about discipline. Warmth is a luxury. Invisibility is survival. Modern buildings are designed to bleed energy on purpose. Thin walls, wide glass, constant airflow. They're efficient for living. They're terrible for hiding. Every design choice assumes the grid is alive and no one is watching from above. People pile on blankets and feel clever. They're not. Blankets trap heat close to your skin, but trapped heat doesn't disappear. It migrates. It seeps into floors, walls, ceilings. If it can't leave slowly, it leaves violently, straight into the structure. Straight into the air, straight into a sensor that's patient enough to wait for the bloom. Ghost sheltering means you stop thinking in terms of layers on you and start thinking in terms of space around you. Dead air is your real armor. Cold, still pockets that chew up contrast before it reaches the shell. Distance matters more than thickness. Compression concentrates heat. Space dilutes it. That's not theory, that's physics doing exactly what it always does. You insulate inward, not outward. You pull your living heat away from the edges and let the exterior stay cold and boring. The building becomes a shell with nothing interesting happening near the skin. From above, it reads as empty. From inside, it feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is doing the work. Comfort is noisy. Discomfort is quiet. Materials lie in different ways. Metal reflects heat, but it also conducts it like a traitor. Foam insulates well, then traps moisture and scent until the shelter starts telling stories. Wood pretends to be neutral, but hoards warmth longer than you expect. Concrete is slow, heavy, and honest. It steals heat without drama. You don't memorize materials. You observe what cools fast and what remembers you. Movement discipline becomes non-negotiable. You don't pace, you don't stretch, you don't shift because you're bored. Every sudden movement is a thermal spike that stains the space for minutes. Heat doesn't vanish when you stop. It fades on its own schedule. You move once, with purpose, then you stay put like an object. You also learn to give your heat somewhere safe to go. Not walls, not windows, mass, water containers, stone, dense objects that absorb warmth slowly without glowing like skin. You let them drink from you evenly, turning sharp emissions into dull background noise. Heat sinks don't hide you. They blunt you. As this sets in, the shelter stops feeling like a home. Good. Homes announce occupation. Ghost shelters feel temporary, awkward, unfinished. No decoration, no symmetry, nothing that says someone's settled in. Patterns are what machines love. You deny them patterns and they move on to easier targets. Insulation isn't about disappearing forever. That's fantasy. It's about surviving the past. The scan. The moment when the sky looks down and decides what's worth remembering. You don't need to be invisible all night. You just need to not exist when attention sweeps across you. And attention never stops sweeping. The most common failure isn't bad shelter. It's bad timing. People treat thermal concealment like a static trick. Build it once, hide forever. That fantasy gets people outlined and cataloged. Thermal systems don't just look for heat. They look for change. Change is what gets remembered. Timing is what decides whether a mistake fades or becomes a target. Thermal sensors don't see the way eyes do. They integrate, they average, they wait. A warm shape that appears suddenly triggers curiosity. A warm shape that stays triggers certainty. A warm shape that rises and falls with the environment gets ignored as background noise. Machines don't think in stories, they think in persistence. That's why timing becomes the real defense. You don't rush into shelter hot and breathing hard. You arrive early. You sit. You let the structure equalize. You let your body cool down until your presence blends with the building instead of rewriting it. Heat introduced slowly looks natural. Heat introduced fast looks alive. Cooking is the loudest timing mistake people make. Fire isn't just light, it's hours of thermal debt. Digestion raises core temperature long after the meal is done. You don't eat hot when drones are active. You don't boil water when the sky is awake. You eat cold. You accept hunger as camouflage. Calories spent now glow later. Weather becomes your schedule. Cold nights are brutal because contrast is sharp. A human body stands out like a wound. Warm days are forgiving. Rain smears signatures. Wind breaks contours. Moving air confuses thermal edges the way water erases footprints. You don't fight weather. You cooperate with it. You plan movement when the world is already noisy. Most people who get caught aren't unlucky. They're impatient. They settle too fast, like prey that thinks the chase is over. They light fires at the wrong hour. They move when they're bored. They forget that heat has memory. Buildings remember you. Floors, chairs, walls, they hold warmth and betray it slowly, long after you think you're gone. That's why entry and exit matter more than occupancy. You plan exits before you arrive. You cool the space down before you leave. You don't abandon a shelter glowing like a fresh wound. A warm chair can betray you after you've disappeared. Residual heat is a trail machines follow without emotion. The professionals don't look hidden. They look absent. No spikes, no persistence. No behavior that demands classification. Just another cold, dull shape dissolving into a grid full of cold, dull shapes. They don't aim for invisibility. They aim for irrelevance. This is where ego dies. You don't beat the technology. You don't trick it. You don't prove anything. You let it get bored. You deny it anything worth tracking. You become background. You let time do the work. Drones don't hunt people. They hunt anomalies. Stop being one. The ones who survive don't outsmart the system. They exhaust it. The safest shelter never declares itself. The moment a place looks reinforced, cleaned, improved, or defended, it becomes legible. Legibility is death. Machines don't admire craftsmanship. They flag intention. Straight lines, symmetry, repairs made too neatly. Human logic leaves fingerprints. A ghost shelter survives by looking like neglect that never quite resolved into ruin. Ruins outperform bunkers for a reason. Half-broken spaces fracture expectation. Collapsed roofs vent heat without ceremony. Jagged edges scramble outlines. Nothing reads as deliberate. Nature does most of the work if you let it. Moss, dust, uneven light, water stains, all of it creates thermal noise that blurs classification. The mistake is fixing things. Fixing draws lines. Lines get traced. A ghost shelter is not sealed. It leaks on purpose. Cold seeps inward. Heat bleeds outward, slowly, unevenly, the way rot spreads instead of fire. You don't want a clean gradient from warm to cold. Clean gradients are signatures. You want mess. You want temperature to look accidental, inconsistent, forgettable. Thermal camouflage isn't invisibility, it's irrelevance. Corners are traps. Heat pools there like guilt. Ceilings hoard warmth and hand it to the sky. Height is exposure. Depth is safety. Low spaces work because heat rises and leaves you behind. Broken floors help because the ground steals warmth, honestly, without announcing it. Dirt doesn't glow. Stone doesn't care. The planet is the best accomplice you'll ever have, and it doesn't ask questions. Symmetry is a confession. Machines read symmetry as design and design as occupancy. You learn to love imbalance. A chair placed wrong, a wall that doesn't line up, a doorway half blocked by debris. The shelter should look like a mistake no one bothered to correct. Predators watch for movement. Machines watch for intention. Give them neither. You stop personalizing space. No comfort objects. No tidy corners. No improvements that suggest permanence. Ownership is a modern fantasy that gets people cataloged. In Collapse, everything you claim claims you back. With attention, with expectation, with pursuit. A ghost shelter is something you borrow briefly and return colder than you found it. You treat the shelter as a pause, not a destination. You arrive already planning the exit. You don't invest. You don't settle. Settling creates patterns. Patterns create prediction. Prediction turns surveillance into certainty. You pass through lightly and let the place forget you the way water forgets a footprint. Light is handled the same way as heat. You don't eliminate it, you misdirect it. No clean sources. No steady glow, reflections broken. Angles wrong, shadows inconsistent. A place that looks abandoned should behave like one. Anything else feels staged, and staging is readable. When the drone passes, it shouldn't see refuge. It shouldn't see shelter. It should see entropy doing what entropy does. Disorder without authorship. Nothing to classify. Nothing to revisit. Just another scar in a landscape full of scars. And that's the point. You don't survive by building something better. You survive by becoming something forgettable in a world already falling apart. A flawless shelter won't save you if you don't change with it. Most people don't leak heat through walls. They leak it through behavior. Fidgeting. Shallow breathing. Restless thoughts chasing each other in circles. Stress burns calories and calories burn heat. Panic turns the body into a flare long before the shelter ever fails. Ghost survival starts inside the skin. You slow your breathing until it barely disturbs the air. You move only when movement has a reason. You learn how posture controls heat flow. Knees tucked, limbs folded, weight distributed, nothing pressed hard against exterior surfaces. Contact transfers warmth. Transfer creates signature. Signature invites attention. Stillness becomes a skill, not a lack of action. You stop adjusting because you're uncomfortable. Discomfort is data, not danger. The body settles if you let it. Most people never do. They scratch, shift, sigh, burn heat in little useless bursts. Machines love those bursts. They turn a quiet shape into a blinking one. Sleep changes first. Deep sleep is luxury you can't afford. When muscles relax completely, posture collapses and heat spreads unevenly. Rolling over sends waves through the space that take minutes to fade. You learn to rest lightly, in fragments. Still. Alert. Like animals do. Comfort is sacrificed for consistency because consistency fades faster than spikes. Food becomes thermal math. Hot meals are debt. Digestion raises core temperature for hours, even after the last bite. Heavy food glows longer than you expect. So you eat small, you eat cold, you let hunger sharpen instead of dull. A lean body runs quieter. Patience cools you more reliably than insulation ever will. Water matters too. Warm drinks feel good and betray you slowly. Cold water keeps the system steady. You learn when to sip and when to wait. The body doesn't need constant input. It needs regulation. Regulation keeps output flat. Flat output keeps you forgettable. Emotions turn out to be thermal events. Anger spikes heat. Fear accelerates it. Anticipation burns like a fuse. You flatten your internal weather until nothing storms. Calm isn't peace. Calm is control. You don't suppress feeling. You let it pass without reacting. Reaction is heat. Stillness is camouflage. This is where most people fail, not because they lack gear or knowledge, but because they can't sit with themselves. Silence feels wrong to a mind trained on noise. Stillness feels like danger. So they move, they think, they worry, they glow. The shelter holds, the person doesn't. The ones who vanish aren't tougher, they're quieter on the inside. They don't fight the wait, they don't rush the minutes. They let time stretch until it loses interest. The drone passes once. Then again, then it stops coming back. Nothing worth remembering was ever there. The last mistake happens after relief. After the scan passes. After the silence feels earned. That's when people move too fast and undo everything. Hiding isn't the hard part. Ending your presence is. Machines remember heat the way bone remembers pressure. You don't just leave a place. You have to let it forget you. A ghost shelter is abandoned colder than it was found. You don't stand up and walk out like the danger clock expired. You unwind your presence slowly. You stop generating heat first. You sit. You breathe shallow. You let the room decay back to baseline. Thermal memory dies on its own schedule, not yours. Rush it and the structure keeps your signature like a bruise. You never leave warmth behind. Chairs, floors, walls. Anything you touch becomes evidence if you don't give it time to cool. Heat lingers in mass, especially the kind people lean on when they relax. You plan for that. You stop leaning. You stop touching. You create distance between your body and anything that could remember you. Forgetfulness is engineered, not hoped for. Exits are staged, not improvised. You don't grab gear and move. You transition. You cool your body before exposure. You don't step into open air hot and glowing like a flare. The boundary between shelter and outside is where most failures happen. Sudden contrast is what sensors love. You smooth it. You bleed heat before you break cover. Touch discipline matters on the way out. Exterior surfaces are traps. Doors, frames, ladders, all of them carry heat forward like gossip. You avoid contact where possible. Where you can't, you minimize time and pressure. A handprint in the wrong place can stay warm long enough to be noticed. Machines don't care who left it, they care that it's fresh. Repetition is another confession. Returning the same way teaches the system what you are. Routes create expectation. Expectation creates prediction. Prediction gets you found. You rotate paths. You change timing. You let your movement look random, inefficient, human in the wrong ways. Consistency is how surveillance sharpens its teeth. You also resist the urge to check your work. People look back, people second guess. People hover near places they think protected them. That's nostalgia talking, and nostalgia is loud. Once you leave, you leave. The shelter is no longer yours. Ownership creates attachment. Attachment creates mistakes. The goal was never permanent invisibility. That's fantasy sold to people who want control without cost. The real goal is passage. You pass through surveillance the way fog passes through a forest. Present, uncounted, already fading by the time it's noticed. Nothing stable enough to log. Nothing persistent enough to chase. Thermal drones don't end the world. They just compress consequences. They punish impatience. They reward restraint. They don't hate you. They don't fear you. They don't know you exist unless you insist on being known. And that's the final lesson beneath all of it. Survival in the modern collapse isn't about hiding better. It's about existing less until the moment you decide to exist again.